In this video, I will discuss specifically some techniques and guidelines regarding how to write about literature, because this is a different style of writing than what we wrote for our first essay, which was a personal statement. In general, we want to keep in mind that this is a relatively brief assignment. It's only 3 to 4 pages, so we want to be focused in what we write about. There's not a lot of room to pontificate or add fluff or areas of information that really aren't concise and to the point in your analysis of the short story. This is a formal essay, so you want to use the third person point of view. That includes using pronouns such as she, her, he, him, they, them. Please do not use second person point of view, which includes pronouns like you and yours. And please do not use first person point of view, which includes pronouns like I, me, and mine. Your audience is a serious, educated audience, educated in terms of your audience understands the requirements regarding a literary analysis genre or essay. So you are writing a persuasive argument that uses evidence taken directly from the text and secondary sources. Persuasive means you want to convince your audience to believe your point that you're making, which is your analysis of a specific area of the short story. You're writing a critical analysis rather than an evaluative analysis, which means that you are not going to be subjective and you're not going to involve your personal opinion about how the story is written, for example, such as is it entertaining, is it interesting? You're going to be more focused and you're going to specifically focus on elements of fiction, which I talk about in another video. You want to avoid plot summaries and assume that your audience already knows or is familiar with the story. Beginning with the thesis, you want to create a clear thesis statement that makes an argument. This means your thesis must be debatable, which means not everyone is going to agree with the point you make in your thesis statement. So you don't want to write something that is generally accepted by most people. You want to dig deeper and look for something that not everyone is necessarily going to agree with. This is going to be your individual take on your analysis of the story. You want to persuade your audience that your idea is valid by using evidence to explain and support your thesis. That evidence will derive from details from the story, and that will be your primary source. So I recommend that for each major supporting detail that you include, which has to be directly related to your thesis, which means that information has to come from the story itself. You also include either a direct quote or a paraphrase, again, for each major supporting detail in your essay. You also need to include a secondary source, which I will include in Laulima's Week 6 lesson. So you can choose from a variety of secondary sources. And in this case, these secondary sources are discussions about the short story you're reading from critics. So typically this involves professors who study literature and their take on the story. You also want to put some time and attention into creating a title for your paper. The title is an important part of your paper, and you should use these guidelines for your title. You want to center it without any extra spaces either above or below the title. Everything in your paper should be double spaced. You want to include the author, the story title, and then a colon, and then the main idea of the paper. And you're only going to punctuate the story title. I have an example. Ernest Gaines, colon, the sky is gray, colon, a critical analysis. So this gives you an idea about how to set up your own title. This is the author's name, the story, and then the point you're making about the story. In your introduction, it should be, because the paper is brief, just one paragraph. Be sure to include in your introduction the story's name and the author's name. Only include relevant background information. You don't want to pull in information to fill up your introduction that's not directly related to the story. You can also start by using a compelling quotation, drawing an analogy, or mentioning a brief example from the story. These are ways to get started with your introduction, which will then build up to your thesis statement. Again, you want to assume the reader is familiar with the story, so you do not need to summarize the story. And you also should avoid philosophizing about life in general. That's not the point of this essay. You want to stay very concise and focused in your analysis of the story. In the body or supporting paragraphs of your paper, this is where you're going to develop your line of reasoning or your thesis statement. Each paragraph should have a single focus. Try using a topic sentence at the beginning of each paragraph to help with this, so you do stay focused as you're writing your supporting points. So you're going to use details, which is comprised of evidence from the story, to support your thesis statement. You want to make sure that the details clearly show their relationship to the thesis. And again, for each major supporting idea, so not necessarily every paragraph, but for each major supporting idea, you want to include a paraphrase or direct quote from the story itself, and then at least one reference to a secondary source, which is the literary criticism that I will provide for you in La Lima Week 6 lesson. The conclusion of your paper should wrap up your paper with a sense of completion, so you don't necessarily need to restate your thesis and your major supporting points. Instead, try touching on the meaning of the ending of the story, or explain how the theme continues to be important to audiences today. And again, remember, this is not a platform to philosophize about some of the ideas or topics covered in the story in general. You want to stay focused in your analysis of the story itself. And some other tips to keep in mind: please don't evaluate the writer or the quality of the story. You're critiquing the story and not the author. Focus on the story and one theme. Don't try to convert someone from one religion, belief, or opinion to another. When you do use direct quotations, introduce them first. And I have information in upcoming lessons about how to do this. And then give credit and correctly format citations. This is really important that you always include an in-text citation, which I also have another lesson devoted to coming up. And overall, don't be afraid to dig deep. Think deeply about the themes and the topics in the essay, and try to go beyond just stating the obvious in your analysis of the essay. This concludes this video. Thank you.